welcome to episode 15 of the Art of Life podcast. I am your host, Matt. I am the Koi Fish Prophet. And what are we talking about today? We're getting a little bit abstract with it. We are talking about what does it mean to be an artist? What does it mean to create art? And kind of, something that's been on my mind a lot. I've been working from home for a couple days. And just what it's like to live with a neurodivergent brain, whether that's dyslexia, ADHD, some form of autism. I think it's getting talked about more and more, and I have a lot to say about it. First, we're starting off and just open up some notes here. I always try and write some notes to keep me on track, because again, that neurodivergent brain. So, what is art, and why this conversation came up? So, I've been kind of infatuated with the idea lately of a face tattoo, maybe like the last 8 months, since like the summer. Not like a big ass like Mike Tyson piece, but something little, maybe even in white ink. And I do recognize they call them job stoppers for a reason. And it's something I really wanted to do, but I told myself when I'm like really secure in my income, then it's maybe something I'll consider. But what I wanted to get tattooed was either art or artist in like katakana or kanji, probably Chinese, but it happens to be 2 characters. But why is that word so important to me? Because of all the stereotypes, archetypes, the artist is one of the ones I relate to the most. And I'm not someone that paints, I do music, but I wouldn't say I'm a musician. I like to perform. I like to, I like the power that music has, but I'm not like a music lover. Like my brother's an incredible musician. He's definitely a music lover. And I've been around other music lovers for me enough to be recognized like, oh, I'm not the same as you. And martial arts falls under the aspect of art, but why is it? Why are so many things so like conceptually created as art, like dance, theater? Some people look at cooking as art. So then, how do we define what art is? And I thought about this a lot and why the word was so much. So then, I went and Googled. So like, art is a multifaceted expression that transcends boundaries, encompassing diverse forms and meanings. It's a diverse range of human activity resulting in products that involve creative or imaginative talents. Okay, oftentimes the creation is expressed through technical proficiency, beauty, emotion, power, and conceptual ideals. Art to me is the truest form of alchemy. It is allowing through movement, like through one of our senses, we experience something that allows us to empathize with the creator. Sometimes we'll hear music in another language, right? And because of the tones and the voice, it elicits an emotional reaction in us, right? Or like Andrew Huberman was talking about like bass face. Like when the song has a lot like strong bass, you see people make the same face. And so art is like such an important part of this world, and it's something that's kind of like pushed aside. It's something that like when you tell your parents you want to be an artist, like, oh, I guess you want to be broke. But it's like a really hard space to make it in. And we live in a world today where artistic endeavors are easier than ever. Like I'm doing YouTube and TikTok and Instagram, and I have a platform because before, like think about when we were kids, like when I was a kid, YouTube wasn't really around. Like it was just starting off. Like we didn't have people putting out content, and there's people putting out incredible high quality content out of their bedrooms, young kids doing it, because we all have, I think it's an inherent part of being a human. And to me, like I said earlier, art is the form of alchemy because I'm transmuting emotion into something, right? It's why I love unique jewelry that's been gifted or made for me, because it has a story to it. It has an energy to it. And I think that's what I feel as an artist. I feel like my whole life is being put into like a podcast, or even when I'm fighting, right? Like when you fight with someone or you spar with someone, you find out a lot about their personality, right? Because you're putting them under pressure. One of my old coaches always used to say, I find out what you're made of. Like you squeeze shit, you get shit. You squeeze a rock, it becomes a diamond. You squeeze an orange, you get orange juice. You want to find out what someone's about, you apply pressure. And obviously he was a jiu-jitsu coach with language like that. But why is art so important in today's society, right? And then why is it discredited if it is considered so important, right? Like I have Leonardo, or my take on Leonardo da Vinci's art on my tattooed onto me, because he drew the Vitruvian Man, the perfect man, as the idea that was art and math intersect, right? And for me that was like striking in combat sports. Like It is a artistry of my personality. You can tell a lot about me by the way I fight, and you can also see that there's like a mathematic and a scientific and like a broken down, really hyper processed thought pattern. So art is super important. It's a part of all of our lives, whether you think you're artistic or not. It stimulates creativity in the world. It's a reflection of culture, right? Like when you look at the Renaissance and how important that was based on artistry and what was happening in the world at that time, it fosters empathy, right? When I listen to a really sad poem or sad song, I can empathize with the singer or the author of that track. It's oftentimes thought provoking, right? It's a medium for expression outside of word. Where words fail, music or theater, or there's other ways to elicit. So like, we have other ways of communication outside of language. And that's like a really interesting thought. And that's kind of, you see the influence of art in like cultural identity, in individual lives, and political discourse. It's a powerful tool because people behave based on emotion. One of the best ways to elicit emotion is through artistry, right? And look at like ancient artistry, like the the drawings on that, man, you guys are gonna lose your shit. The drawings on the pyramids, right? The hieroglyphs, that's the word I was looking for. The hieroglyphs like really shaped what we know about the world before us, right? That was their way of relaying information to us, right? Or cave paintings, like it leaves a mark on humanity. And that's when I'm gonna get into the next topic, is like neurodivergence, right? Which is just a term to describe people whose brains don't work the same as the norm. And that's why they talk about like autism being a spectrum, or like neurodivergence being a spectrum. And I grew up with a super different brain, and never mind all the concussions and stuff I've suffered that made it difficult, or made it worse. I don't really know. I'll never know how it affected my brain. But what I do know is I was recently diagnosed with ADHD, and when I was very young, I was diagnosed with dyslexia. And it was something that I am now so grateful for, but it made school really hard. Like, I remember when I was a kid, I never thought I was stupid, but I felt so stupid. So like in grade 4, not only like I talked about in the last episode, was I really overweight and had a hard time with social cues, like, and making friends. I couldn't organize one desk. So like being the fat kid and having 2 desks. And ever since I was talking to my mom about it today, like, when did you think I was dyslexic? She's like, as soon as you started learning to write, you would do something, and then you'd be like, that's wrong. She'd be like, how do you know? And she's like, the face you made. It wasn't because of what I was doing, because I write. If you watch me handwrite, people lose their mind when they watch you write their hands, because I write upside down. I bring letters upside down still. But I'm so grateful for this, like, argumentatively, like, neurodivergent brain of mine, because I think a lot of my creativity comes from, you know, that side. Like, my ADHD, when you have... So, when I was a kid, they thought I was, like, you know, mentally challenged. Maybe not mentally challenged, but I was failing in grade 4. And so they're like, something's wrong with this kid. He's writing his letters backwards. We think he's dyslexic. Let's go get him tested. And so I went and got tested in Ottawa. And I remember I was failing mathematics at the time. And I finished that test in like a separate room, one-on-one with a person. And their thing was like, hey, like, you're scoring grade 10 level mathematics. Like, why are you failing? And it was literally just like bringing my thoughts to paper was really hard for me. Anything that happened around me would distract me immensely, and I would like hyper focus on those things. And it was just like very challenging in the box of what school was. But now as an adult, what I do for a living, it's like very much a gift, not to mention the resilience and determination it was from like, okay, it's like that famous Albert Einstein quote about like, if you measure the intelligence of a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it'll grow up its whole life thinking it's stupid. And so I struggled in school up until I got like, all they did was let me type my exams and type my assignments, because writing to paper with a pencil was awful for me, and do it in a separate room where a teacher would watch me and make sure I didn't cheat. And my grades skyrocketed. Like, school became easy from being like very, very difficult. But all of that allowed me to be like, okay, I can't learn the same way as most of my peers. I'm having challenges writing and reading, and so I had to learn really different paths to success. I had to learn alternative ways to study, and, you know, I couldn't take my own notes, right? So I'd actually get notes from someone and break it down and record classes and lectures. Like, those were ways that helped. But some of the benefits of it were like that hyperfixation. That happens on bad things sometimes. Like today it worked out. I worked from home and I was like super hyperfixated. I looked at my phone and it was like 6:30. I was like, oh man, I've been doing this all day, and I have a ton of energy. And I think the things that make me likable as a person, some of them are byproducts of this like neurodivergent brain. Some things like the spontaneity. People like, I remember I went for a procedure recently. I was talking to my doctor, and I'm like, yeah, like I just got a fresh tattoo. I just got back from Mexico. And she's like, man, the life you live. But I can't fathom living another life because this is just who I am. And it's a byproduct of that neurodivergent brain. And the dyslexia, which was the first diagnosis, I think that's what makes me creative in my language, because I don't think the way everyone else thinks, right? And I process things differently. Like oftentimes I'll look at a problem, and I'll look at things totally different. And like just from a little bit of research, like your brain, when you can't like understand the language, looks at things more holistically. And that's something I notice when I'm reading. Like I'll fuck up words because I'll read the beginning and end, but I won't actually like read the word, and I'll never realize. Like I was telling someone sweet dreams, just like texting, and I wrote sweet dreams, and like just went right over my head, and they were laughing. But I'm like, what are you laughing about? I don't get it, because I'm like always on to the next thing, right? And that's like a beautiful aspect of being alternative, and it's a beautiful aspect of why I relate to art. And I think more and more it's being diagnosed in people, and it doesn't mean you need to be medicated. You know, some people can use medication. It's a tool. I think all drugs are a tool. That's a whole other episode. But understanding how your brain works, what you're good at, what you're not good at, and now having access, like trying to run a business, I know there's certain things I really am not good at. Instead of wasting, 24 hours to do something that takes someone else 2 hours, I'll pay someone to hire them because I figured out what my time is worth. And if it's going to take me too much time and too much stress and it's not worth it, I can make money doing things I'm really good at and spend that money and pay someone else who's really good at doing the things I'm not good at. And that creates this collaboration that keeps the energy moving and the money moving, right? But overall, like growing up with like just this alternative brain and, head trauma, like I really think a lot of my thinking is way outside the norm. And it's like such a blessing. It allows me to be who I am, and it allows me to be embraced because I'm not like most people, and that's like really sought after. But I think when you like really sit into who am I, what am I good at, what do I like, how does my brain work, let me build systems around this because this is data that I can use, right? And like for those that have worked with me as a coach, I love data. I want to know your resting heart rate. I want to know what your heart rate is peaking. I want to know your daily weigh-ins, right? Especially for high-level athletes, like because the more data I have, the more educated I can make a decision based off of, which is not something that's typical of people who have the same neurodivergence, quote unquote, that I do. And like if you look at like historical figures, specifically like warriors, because my obsession with martial arts, one of the best explanations we have to how they were able to do this is from some form of like neurodivergence. So there's a lot of people that believe, I'm not sure if you know who Miyamoto Musashi is. Miyamoto Musashi is a famous samurai. He had over 60 duels to the death in his lifetime, because that was like super common. He wrote the Book of Five Rings, which is one of the first books I ever read. I read it when I was 12 years old. And I read it again multiple times, and it changes every time, but it was like full of valuable insight. But when you look at the guy who had such intense focus and obsession with perfection, such unconventional strategies, one of the best explanations is that he was on the spectrum of autism, right? His creativity, there's like a famous story of Miyamoto Musashi who, he's doing duels, and back in the time, samurai or warriors were known for their skill set, and he was going to fight someone who was very skilled in like a specific, very long blade. And this is like arguably the first historical of like a psych out. So they had agreed to meet at a specific place at a specific time. I might be butchering the story, but you'll get the point of it. He was meeting him on an island, or he's taking a boat to get there. And what he does, he sat in the boat and he took the oar and he took out his blade and he sharpened the oar into what we call a bokken, which is like a practice sword. But he made it the length of the oar. He made it longer than the guy he was going to fight's sword, but it was made of wood. Not only did he psych him out, he showed up like so many hours late, waiting this guy's probably frustrated and angry, and he was able to conquer this battle because of that psych out, because of that like psychological ideal that I'm not going to use a sword, I'm going to use a wooden sword that I make that's longer than his, and he's not used to fighting anyone that's got a better reach than him. And so that's like a famous duel, and his ability to recognize patterns and develop really unique strategies. There's a lot of stories about his sensory sensitivity. It's just so like if you're diagnosed with something that's like slightly neurodivergent, I don't think it's a bad thing as long as you understand. So like I've always been a fan of like diagnosis is often used as an excuse, but instead it should be used as a roadmap. Right? Diagnosis is to explain something, but I'm not going to use it as an excuse. If I understand it, I understand the diagnosis and why it is the way that it is. That's data for me to modify my life to work around. Does that make sense? I'm saying that like you guys might be able to answer me, but I'm hoping you're answering. I'm a little distracted. I don't know if you guys are watching on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, you're seeing this red light shining on me. I'm experimenting with red light therapy because when I was in Mexico, during that retreat, we did meditations every morning by red light, and I felt really good, and I started like diving into some research about how powerful and good for red light is. So that's why I'm all red right now, because I figured gonna blast myself with some red light while I talk to you guys. Actually, one of my students who I care about dearly, she's absolutely awesome. She has synesthesia, and she's an animator, and she's absolutely amazing at what she does. She's someone I care about a lot. But I know when I'm coaching her, I can like see, and I can relate, because like I remember being talked to when I talk to you and I just go elsewhere, like I hyper focus on, I see that happen, but it's not this diagnosis that it's bad. She's an animator. She uses that skill that she sees. Those that don't know synesthesia, there's different types. But what happens is sounds immediately invoke like colors, shapes, textures, and like she's kind of talked to me about like when she hears things, she like sees animation. So like, isn't that the perfect way to become an animator? Like, I don't know. You figure out how you're like. That's what growing up is about. So being a human, I figure out my strengths, my weaknesses, what I like, what I don't like, and I build a life around that. And I could tell you, I would be so miserable if I tried to fit in with everyone else. You know, I wouldn't get to be myself. Like all the things about my life that work are also a byproduct of these quote unquote like negative perceived things that I think are like my superpower, right? I hope that makes sense to you guys. I hope you guys got some insight talking about that. And as always, let me know if you guys have any questions. I think next week, knock on wood, we're going to do an Ask Me Anything. So make sure you guys DM me. In the show notes, there's also going to be an email, maybe a form to send me questions, because I'm excited to, you know, share some advice. And it gives me ideas if there's really good questions to do full podcast episodes. Now I'm ending a quote just related to the neurodivergent stuff. It's by Dr. Edward Hallowell. And just so you guys know, sometimes I have quotes that like off the top of my head I love. And other times I have like no idea, but I know kind of the feeling I'm trying to evoke, artist. And I look up quotes and I dig through and I find one that really resonates that I want to ponder. So what he said, Dr. Edward Hallowell, the best way to think about ADHD is not as a mental disorder, but as a collection of traits and tendencies that define a way of being in this world. And, you know, that's what makes the world go round. There are infinite people in this world that work in infinite ways and, like, different types of brain. If the life of a fly living the life of a spider is chaos and vice versa. I look at some of my peers and, like, some of their lives I couldn't imagine living. And the same way, arguably more. Like a lot of people look at my life like, I don't know how you do what you do, but for me it really works. And so if you're struggling with that, with finding yourself, embrace the way that you are. It is what it is. That's the hand you're dealt, right? That's like the best lesson I think I ever learned in this life. The hand that you're dealt is what you're dealt. There's no point wasting any energy going boo-hoo, what if this, that, because that's not the reality. The reality we're in now is the hand you're dealt, the brain you're dealt, the heart you're dealt, and you gotta fucking deal with it. So on that, I'm signing out. I appreciate you guys very much, and I will see you guys next week. Cheers.